What do we find at the intersection of faith and the world? Our new podcast, Crossroads, explores this question in thought-provoking conversations featuring guests from around the world who are seeking to live faithfully in the public square. This is a safe space to discuss politics, technology, and our responsibilities as citizens. Pull up a chair and meet us as we search for a better way forward. Welcome to Crossroads, where we discuss the intersection of sacred and civic. I'm your host, Jo Nygaard Owens. On today's episode, we're delighted to welcome Sam Glassenberg, founder and CEO of Level X, the world's leading medical video game studio. Welcome, Sam. Where are you joining us from?
Great to be here. I'm calling in from Chicago, the center of the universe.
Fantastic. And we also welcome back Dr. Sonia Coman, the Cathedral's Director of Digital Engagement. Sonia's work at the Cathedral includes forging the trail of what it means to have a digital cathedral and make it a lived reality for those of you who join us from afar. Welcome, Sonia, and where are you joining us from?
Hi, Jo. Hi, Sam. I'm joining from Washington, D.C., actually from my office here at the Cathedral.
Fantastic. And I am in my home office in Cleveland, Ohio. So, Sam, your career began in the video game industry, working for companies like LucasArts, Microsoft, and others. And tell us about your move from the entertainment side of gaming to the instructive side when you founded Level X.
Look, I would love to say that Level X was some grand idea that I had, but actually Level X was founded by accident.
Oh.
So, yeah, I'm very lucky. I've had this impactful career in video games, which essentially made me the disgrace of my family because I come from a long line of doctors from my grandfather on down. To give you a sense of how bad this got, in 2006, I accepted a technical Emmy on behalf of my team at Microsoft for pushing the cutting edge of video game graphics.
Mhm.
It's not the one they show on TV. It's the technical Emmys, but it's the same statue.
Still a big deal.
I call that's what I thought. So I call my parents to be like, big deal. My dad is an anesthesiologist here at Northwestern. Without skipping a beat, he goes, Sam, that's very nice. But in this family, we only recognize Nobel Prizes. He goes, you're not yet 30 years old. You can still go to medical school. So this is the universe that I come from.
Wow.
So I think it was about 6 years later. So in around 2012, he gives up. He says, Sam, you're too old to go to medical school. Put all this gaming nonsense to good use. Make me a game to train my colleagues to do a fiber optic intubation. Tricky procedure. We only do it on difficult patients. Even experienced anesthesiologists will struggle with it if they haven't done enough cases. He goes, can you just make me a game they can play on their phones? Now, I'm busy running like the biggest independent video game studio in Hollywood. We're making games for Hunger Games and Mission Impossible. Sure, Dad. Out of guilt, I sit down for 3 weekends. I throw together this crappy little game and I upload it to the App Store. I don't think about it again. 2 years later, he calls me, hey, Sam, how many people downloaded it? I go, Dad, I don't know how many of your friends downloaded your fiber optic laryngoscopy game, but I'll check for you. And I looked, and we had rallied an audience of 100,000 doctors, nurses, and airway specialists who'd been playing this thing.
Wow.
I had no idea. So I Google it to try to figure out how this happened. And I discover, unbeknownst to me, they've been doing efficacy studies at medical schools all over the world that shows this little game I made for my dad is drastically improving physician performance.
Oh my gosh.
You can't make this up. So I'd love to say that Level X was some grand idea. Nope. It was all an accident, a little bit of parental guilt. And so that was the thing. What if it wasn't just me? What if we took the top video game designers, artists, engineers who've worked on everything from, Mortal Kombat to Words with Friends, team them up with hundreds of physician advisors and contributors across every major therapeutic area in medicine to use video game technology and video game design to accelerate the adoption curve in healthcare.
So did you get respect for the game?
So I don't know that my dad would admit it, but he does love coming to the office and driving all the game designers, artists, engineers crazy with all of his ideas for games to capture the various challenges of anesthesiology.
I can picture that for sure. So I only recently learned that the gaming industry eclipses both the film and the music industries, like making 3 times as much as the music industry and almost 4 times as much as film. And part of the beauty of the gaming industry is its diversity, both in how the game is played and what its topics can be. So, how does the neuroscience of play contribute to the industry? And how can we utilize this medium in ways that enhance our society and not simply entertain? Not that entertainment is bad, I'm not knocking that.
Look, and of course, during COVID, the games industry did a great job at like keeping people entertained, connected with their friends at a safe distance.
Exactly.
So where does neuroscience play into all of this? So like you said, the video games industry is huge now. It's $200 billion in revenue a year. We keep growing year over year. New audiences, people play more and more. There's like 3 billion people playing games. Everybody's playing. How do we do this? Over the last 30 years, we have distilled the neurochemical recipe for changing behavior and driving learning, basically among any audience. Game designers have figured out how do you hit the perfect balance of reward and frustration, of challenge and skill to maximize the release of neurochemicals in the brain, to maximize behavior change and learning. When we think about behavior change,
Mhm.
so the Obama administration spent 8 years, I think it was close to $2 to $3 billion to try to stem the obesity epidemic. At what point, I think Michelle Obama took it on as as one of her personal missions during her second term to like, how do we get overweight Americans to just get off the couch and go for a walk? And then we saw within 48 hours, all of these meritorious efforts were eclipsed by a single video game that got tens of millions of Americans up and walking for miles. Pokemon Go,
Oh.
right? I don't know what the
Yes.
situation was in downtown DC. Downtown Chicago was a zombie apocalypse for a month. And there are no kids in downtown, right? The average player's in their late 20s. Everybody's playing this. Now, you look at that as this weird phenomenon, but actually, all video games are doing that. They're changing behavior. The difference is what they're doing is instead of most video games aren't getting you to walk around strange neighborhoods, but they're getting you to come back every day, invite your friends, engage with sponsored content, spend money. Like they're driving behavior through complex, systems of reward and whatnot, and they're driving that behavior change. And so you can utilize this same toolbox to train doctors, to educate, to drive whatever sorts of societal improvements that we want to do at scale. I mean, we're using this at Level X to train doctors to do everything from how to manage a ventilator, the puzzle of how to diagnose rare disease. We do a lot of work using video game skin rendering technology to train doctors how to recognize skin disease on skin of color, patients that might not represent the majority of patients that they see every day. So there's just endless examples about how you can use this toolbox to drive behavior change and drive learning.
That's amazing.
Sam, what you're sharing with us is, first of all, extraordinary. And I can think of two areas in which video games seem to be pushed outside of what we consider their traditional boundaries. One is this integration of the virtual environment with the actual reality around us. And the other is more generally this notion of gamification. In many fields, gamification has long been this enriching method, right, to facilitate better learning experiences. For example, online training programs, in healthcare, but also across many other fields, including cybersecurity, employee engagement, more often than not, will gamify the learning process to keep course takers engaged, to help them remember takeaways from what they're learning. And I read somewhere about this notion of serious games, including in studies on technology for the medical field, basically referring to games that are, as you were saying, Joe, not for entertainment, but games that have a clear utility in terms of sustaining attention, increasing capacity for memory. And I think it's also being used in healthcare for screening patients, right? Sam, you were mentioning a little bit about this in terms of monitoring vitals or behavior while a patient is engaged in such a, quote unquote, serious game.
So, Sonia, I am curious. Just this past Sunday on our worship YouTube chat, I was asked about video tours of the cathedral. So we have a wonderful playlist on YouTube that I shared, and folks were very excited about that. But as you're working on our digital cathedral, it's more than a YouTube playlist. What are the plans for our digital cathedral, and how can folks who might never step foot in our building be able to interact with it?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked that, Joe. Well, we have some very, very exciting plans in the works. I think it touches on something that we've been discussing here a little bit, which is this notion of having enriching, truly immersive experiences in a virtual reality. And very soon, stay tuned, our listeners. We will have a fully walkable virtual tour, a 3D model of the cathedral, and we will soon publish a walkable tour of the nave, of the crypt, of our New Virginia May Center. And we hope that it can also serve as a foundation for VR experiences in this virtual space. And similar to what Sam was describing, is just a way of empowering people to experience something that maybe otherwise they can't physically, also to learn while having fun and being engaged. These wonderful 3D models are made possible by our friends at CoStar, whose leadership and very, very talented staff have made this dream of the cathedral come true.
Well, I cannot wait. And I know that many of our folks who love the cathedral are so excited about this. So, one area where AI is making leaps and bounds for good is in the ways it's able to help those with disabilities. So, in your experiences, Sam and Sonia, what are some of the ways we're already seeing this assistive technology at work, and what types of things can we expect to see in the near future?
I think from an AI perspective, we've been seeing actually for a number of years cochlear implants and other tools that actually, including some of the newer vision implants, they literally they simulate human neural networks using artificial ones. I mean, these are some of the same neural network architectures behind ChatGPT and others, right? The way they create these just massive arrays of artificial neurons,
Hmm.
and we use those to, yeah, again, for to help the deaf hear and the blind see. And so that's just sort of one of the more obvious examples. But over time, we're going to continue to see ways that AI is going to help people read and understand things and help people with vision issues and motor issues. And in addition to, helping doctors in the operating room treat patients that have conditions that can be addressed through surgical or medical intervention.
Wonderful. Sonia, what have you seen?
Well, using AI and video games to help us as a society improve medical care and truly support the breakthroughs that can save lives and improve quality of life, that is just incredible. Joe, I'm thinking that on this podcast, especially in our previous episodes on AI and ethics, some of our guests have noted that AI holds such tremendous potential. It can be used effectively for good, while it also poses some serious concerns and even threats to our understanding of ourselves, our jobs, our privacy, and so on. And I think that what Sam mentioned in terms of his work at Level X and this array of options that AI, especially when combined with virtual reality, when combined with video games, the ways that this new technology can help people with disabilities, people who have serious medical concerns, it's also inspiring because it represents a kind of an unequivocal example of using AI for good. And I think that can be extended also to the realm of video games because this one, too, historically has been seen in a very complex way, right? It's a positive, as we said, extremely successful industry, but it also comes with complex ethical issues and all kinds of ramifications. And it helps us see the upside. It has a clearly beneficial purpose. I'd love to return actually to thinking about the social aspect of video games and the social aspect of this kind of medical gamification. I think that very often when we think of people playing video games, we have a little bit in the back of our minds this picture of someone who's somehow divorced from reality, right? Someone who's immersed in that virtual context, perhaps alienated from their friends in real lives. And Sam, what are some of your experiences, some of your projects? I'm curious in terms of gamification and virtual reality.
So, specifically with regard to connecting people, one of the things that we've been doing, again, we're constantly bringing over the latest technologies from games and finding ways that they can solve problems in healthcare. And so, for example, we've actually built cloud gaming systems. One of the things that gaming is exceedingly good at is allowing people to play together. During COVID, that's was one of the primary ways that people could actually find activities to do together without being in the same room.
Yeah.
And so we've been utilizing those technologies to create environments where doctors can collaborate and play medical video games. So a doctor in London can train remotely a trauma surgeon in Kiev by doing surgery together on a virtual patient simulated in the cloud, or solving a complex diagnostic puzzle collaboratively. And so we're utilizing the combination of game technologies and neuroscience based game mechanics to help accelerate this adoption and enable doctors from around the world to be able to train without having to be in the same location, but train on virtual patients.
That's amazing.
That's amazing. That's extraordinary.
We're having a lot of fun.
I've heard of ways that, whether it's a headset or something that reads the eyes, there are ways for folks whose bodies may not work as well to still be able to take on jobs and to write and to do all sorts of things that might not have been possible before.
One of the miracles of AI is their ability now to literally allow people with locked in syndrome to communicate.
Mm.
So essentially what you're able to do is, one of the things that AI is very good at is interpreting the output of neural networks. So they're able to, essentially put probes in people's brains and then interpret that using AI systems in order to allow people who otherwise can't really move muscles effectively to outwardly communicate and interact. And I mean, play games is one example,
Hmm.
but communicate and interact with the broader world. So I think that, AI is really just sort of has this incredibly malleable ability, especially when combined with, robotics and other tools to fill a lot of the, when humans have the inability to do certain things, or their senses or their ability to move or communicate are limited. AI and these tech combined with these other technologies can come in and fulfill great human needs.
I'm thinking of the history of this, the recent history, thinking of that moment in 2021 when Facebook announced that it would change its name to Meta. I think that in the news and for the general public, it was this sign that the tech community is embracing the metaverse. But then that shift was really quite dramatic when towards the end of 2023, all we could hear about was not the metaverse, but AI once ChatGPT came into focus.
I think the important thing with any technology, and we started talking about this earlier, when you talk about games or AI, any of these things can be, they're just technologies. They can be used for good, they can be used for evil, they can be used to benefit society or not. Okay, what can we do? How do we guide that? And I think the most important factor is who's using it.
Hmm.
And that's the important thing. So when people who, let's say, index high on the fulfillment scale, right? The folks who, could otherwise be doing anything, but instead are working in healthcare or are working in entertainment, working in something where they want to have a fulfilling purpose in life. You want those to be the people that are jumping on these technologies, because the bad actors automatically are. And what worries me is when the good actors look at technologies like AI and they go, oh no, here's the dystopian future and there's a utopian future. And they go, oh, here's the possible dystopian future. I shouldn't touch it. Means it's going to arc in the wrong direction, right? You need the good people, you need the altruistic people to be the ones that are jumping on this technology. And I think that's actually where the games industry provides an excellent model for how to embrace tools like generative AI. In the video games industry, every 5 years, we need to deliver an order of magnitude more content at an order of magnitude greater detail as the game platforms get better and better.
Mm-hmm.
But the game's price stays the same. It's still $60. So you're not going to be able to hire 10,000 people to recreate the city of New York for your next game. So every 5 years, the video games industry reinvents how it makes things. New generations of tools are constantly coming out to make every artist in the industry an order of magnitude more productive every 5 years. And so games look at generative AI as this sort of welcome toolbox. Great, now I don't have to do the thing I was doing before. I can move up the stack. And I think it's that healthy approach that every industry should be taking when they look at generative AI. Not like, oh no, what does it mean for my job? But how can I use this so my job can be more fulfilling and I can have more impact?
Right. I was at a church and AI conference recently, and one of the most interesting questions raised was, when social media hit big time, churches were the ones who were like, oh, no, 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 we can't be doing this. And we lost a voice. And so, how do we get ahead, just like what you were saying, as the folks on the positive side, and get our voices out there and utilize the technology in ways that can build up rather than break down?
A friend of mine compared the advent of AI to the Industrial Revolution. I think that we very often hear AI compared to the advent of the internet. And for sure, there is a paradigm shift with the advent of the internet. But I think that probably the comparison to the Industrial Revolution is even more apt because, as both of you were saying, it has such wide ranging implications for people's understanding of who they are, for their jobs, for how they function in society. And it doesn't have to be an existential threat, right? It can be a toolbox that will actually enhance what people do and make dreams possible, like the ones that we were discussing in the medical field.
Sam, we have loved hearing about the work that you've been doing. Can you tell us what future projects you have coming up?
Sure. We have all sorts of interesting projects underway. We just launched a video game on the SpaceX Polaris Dawn mission to train astronauts how to do procedures under ultrasound in zero gravity. So we are busy in every therapeutic area in medicine, capturing the challenges of medical practice using video game tech and video game design. When I think about even just things like ultrasound, and I think about why NASA funded that work.
Mhm.
So we were funded by the Mars mission because if you're 9 months into the Mars mission, it can be 40 minutes for the speed of light to make a round trip. You're in a resource constrained environment where there's no CT scanner, there's no x-ray. The only tool you have to see inside the body is ultrasound, and the nearest professional is, billions of miles away. This is very similar to resource constrained environments here on Earth.
Mhm.
My wife was recently on the Polish Ukrainian border taking care of refugees streaming across, and she's a primary care pediatrician. She was having pregnant patients come across the border. She remembered enough ultrasound to be able to, get a fetal heartbeat. But she was like, look, if I had better ultrasound training, just in time, I could deliver better care. And so throughout the world, we see just this one example of one
Mhm.
technology, ultrasound, which is very difficult to interpret. But if you can train the human brain to recognize it, an expert stenographer, looks at ultrasound, you and I look at it, we just see noise. She
Mhm.
looks at it and she goes, oh, yeah, I see that. That's fluid, that's air, that's bone. If you can help a novice become an expert in interpreting ultrasound, then with $1,000 device that plugs into your phone, anyone in sub-Saharan Africa, a nurse, a midwife in India, can now see inside the body, diagnose and treat all sorts of conditions. Because again, it's resource constrained. And so I look at these technologies, even technologies that we're literally building for the space program, have the ability to improve quality of care for 1 billion people here on Earth.
Wow. Even within the United States, in the Southeast, Alabama, Mississippi, there's a dearth of OBGYNs. Women are not getting the care that they need, and they're dying in greater numbers in the US than any other developed nation because they don't have this care.
Yeah, rural environments. You're
Mhm.
far from an academic medical center.
Yeah.
People have limited training. There's limited resources. How do you empower and train those people
Mhm.
in order to be able to provide the best quality of care, and video games can do that.
Amazing.
We got space, we got Ukraine, we got resource constrained environments in sub-Saharan Africa.
I think we
Wow.
touched on almost every single type of use of video games and AI
Not even close.
Oh
Not
my
even
and not
close.
God.
even close. Oh my goodness. Well, it's very inspiring. It's
Yeah,
really amazing.
it is. In this intersection of artificial intelligence, medicine, and gaming, what gives you hope both for the near future, but then also what dreams might we realize with greater time?
I think we're at an incredibly thrilling intersection where a huge set of society's long-standing problems are going to be solved. And I think if you look in the short term, let's just talk about games and medicine. For decades, we've had this challenge where new devices, new techniques, new treatments are invented, right, become available, but it can be years, it can be decades until those technologies and those treatments become the standard of care, right, that the average patient has access to them. And the reason for that is not because doctors are Luddites, it's not because they're backwards. It's because historically, the tools and technologies available to them to learn have basically been read a document, maybe watch a video, and then practice on live human beings. For a surgeon, when you get a new device, the first 100 patients you do that procedure on, the outcomes aren't going to be as good. You don't want to have to make that sacrifice. And so now we have technology that can be applied to the problem. And so doctors can train on virtual patients, and they can sit down for an hour and train on 8 years of rare, unforeseen, rare complications to prepare themselves and help themselves develop a mental model for really how to think about this device, guideline, or technique. And I think what that does broadly is accelerate the adoption curve in healthcare, which is exciting for everyone, especially those with limited access.
I'm thinking of patient empowerment through tools like AI. We're very often thinking of technology as leaving some people behind, especially those who are not as digitally literate. But I think that applied correctly, these tools can actually empower all of us. I've seen this in hospitals, in clinics, various AI tools that will provide summaries for patients. Some of them are clickable summaries. They can not only remember what their doctor recommended, but they can also have a reliable source to understand the vocabulary of what was presented to them. And that's such a simple tool that is really very, very simple when it comes to what AI can do these days. And yet it can really play such an important role, in terms of making sure that people understand what they should do, what their condition is, and empowering their families and their friends, right, who are often around them as chaperones and trying to make sense of what's happening in sometimes moments that are very emotionally intense. And to what Sam was describing before in terms of simulations, of course, the benefits are incredible. I am thinking of my own research in generative AI and this notion of hyper reality with AI and with video games, especially. Sam, you were saying that the newest generations are always constantly improving. The reality that is presented in these virtual realms is sometimes even more accurate, more high definition, more filled with details than the reality that we observe around us. And that has also really interesting ethical and aesthetic and cognitive implications. But applied to medical training, for example, that sense of an enhanced understanding of reality can help doctors become better at what they do without that element of potential sacrifice, without that element of initial loss of quality. All of these are incredible advancements, and it truly gives me hope to think of visionaries who can take this very complex realm of AI and gamification and give it a simple purpose, one that is clearly oriented towards the benefit of those around us.
Thank you both for those visions of what the future might look like. I can't wait, and I know that it will change our world. Thank you both so much for your time today. Sam, it was such a pleasure to have you on and to learn about the amazing work that you're doing with Level X.
Great to be here.
And Sonia, as always, it's wonderful to have you on the podcast and sharing all the work that you do at the Cathedral and beyond.
Thank you both. Thank you, Sam, for joining us.
You won't want to miss our next episode when I'll be sitting down with former U.S. Treasurer Rosie Rios. Along with getting to know this extraordinary woman, we'll talk about her work as chair of America 250, the United States Congressional Commission planning the 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence. Thanks for listening to Crossroads, and until next time, peace be with you. If the digital offerings of the Cathedral enrich your daily life, please consider becoming a supporter today by making a gift at cathedral.org/inspire.